Good morning, and welcome to Comics for Breakfast. I'm your host, Jason Mink. Today, we're going to go to the Old Guys Who Like Old Comics archives. We're going to pull 3 books from the back issue bins. We're going to crack them open and see just what it is that makes those books special. But now, without further ado, it's breakfast time.
Breakfast!
Let's start off our breakfast with a little Basil Wolverton. Why don't we? While Wolverton is perhaps best known for his grotesque humor creations, the artist also illustrated Western, horror, and adventure strips. Today's special is adventure in the form of Wolverton's sci-fi creation, Space Hawk. So the first thing I thought when choosing to review this comic is, who the heck is Space Hawk? Well, dear reader, we don't have to wait for long. Space Hawk is the superhuman enemy of crime, thank you very much. Why, look, there's some crime happening right now. The diabolical Glork has rigged the election, all but guaranteeing that he will be named new leader of the planet Mars. Aware of this lumpy malcontent's plan, Space Hawk, using a generous amount of synthetic flesh, disguises himself that he might intervene. Mysteriously baffling? Oh, that's it, all right. Space Hawk heads to the surface, where Glork's scheme has already gone awry. In spite of threatening the voters, Glork's opponent Robo has taken a sudden and unexpected lead of 47 million votes. Space Hawk appears more to rub it in than anything and gives Glork a serious dressing down before returning to his ship. This only pisses Glork off. If he can't rule Mars, then he will destroy it. He whips out his attractor ray and focuses it on the moon of Phobos, which violently pulls the planet from its orbit. Space Hawk returns, probably feeling pretty stupid. He could have dealt with this clown pages ago. Glork sets his minions on our hero, but Space Hawk deftly evades them, leaving them to die in a pit of hungry monsters in the dungeon far below. Meanwhile, the attractor ray continues to wreak havoc on the planet's surface. Space Hawk reverses the ray in the nick of time, capturing a greedy Glork and serving him up as dinner to the still aggrieved pit creatures. Mars wishes our hero thanks, but Space Hawk is already off on his next adventure. As Space Hawk cruises along in his ship, his alert mind catches vibrations of evil. An interstellar police cruiser chases a pirate craft to the surface of Uranus. Upon landing, the cops are swarmed by the rat-like denizens of the planet, who capture them effortlessly, in spite of the cops all having guns. The cops are then thrown over the city walls, where all are eaten but the ship's captain, Dak, who lives just long enough to fall out of a tree and break his back. Ouch. But fear not. Dak has the brilliant idea of the just-arrived Space Hawk placing his undamaged brain in one of the planet's monstrous inhabitants. Space Hawk, who has remained inexplicably passive in spite of his forewarning, decides, sure, why not? Hey, I guess if you're going to lug one of those brain transference thingies around across the universe, then you might as well use it, right? Space Hawk finds a suitable form for Dak in the guise of a hornosaur, which is in fact a large bipedal monster and not an overly handsy frat brother named Josh. Space Hawk farts around for the next 2 pages, allowing himself to be captured and putting off the Hornosaur murder that we've all been primed for.
Dak smashes the rat leader's ship, and he and Spacehawk have an epic battle on the Hornosaur's back. Spacehawk inexplicably denies Dak his now sole purpose in life, leaving the rat pirate to be consumed by a tide of forest creatures.
It's an oddly unsatisfactory ending to an otherwise entertaining tale from the wild mind of Basil Wolverton. Next up, influences are a funny thing. Oh, sure, talk to any creator and they'll rattle off a list of writers, artists, and otherwise who they can point to as motivating factors in their own development. But far more telling, and more often than not untold, are those creators whose influences might otherwise be forgotten. And while I'm mostly aware of just what went into making me the semi-irreverent minkster that I am today, even I'm guilty of forgetting and cribbing from my own past. Allow me to present Exhibit A in my self-implication, Jim Erskine's death-crazed teenage superheroes. If you're struck by the irony of me being inspired by an obvious byproduct of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle craze, well, I'm with you on that. I was late to the TMNT party, and I don't know that I would have really been into it even if I had been lucky enough to have one of those early issues. But indie comics, and black and whites in general, those I was enthused for. By the mid-1980s, I was tired of Marvel and DC, but hadn't yet discovered Nexus, The Badger, or the rest of that indie comics goodness just hitting its stride. I bought Paul Chadwick's Concrete, Dead World, Warlock 5, and many others, but none of them hit me like death-crazed teenage superheroes. Now, one might look at this book and think, come on, Mink, that's just another 1980s indie book, part X-Men, part Teen Titans, only with arcade game-level violence, and I'd be hard-pressed to argue those points, but there's more to that here. The comic has energy and enthusiasm of someone who loves the medium but hasn't yet been tempered by it. It's a familiar world we enter into, but here the fantastic gifts that we fantasized about as teens come with a terrible price. But enough of my self-indulgent prattle. Let's get into it. What can only be described as a dark muppet of the id taunts his sweaty pawn. The pieces are in place, the device is primed, the show is about to begin. Across town, in any mall USA, a small doll is destroyed by a single shot to the face, a precursor for the mayhem to come. A young shoplifter stuffs a blouse into her purse, but runs into inventory control in the form of Chance, one of the new breed of superheroes currently running amok. Before Chance can dispense some much-needed justice, he's brained by a girder wielded by Chris, another superpowered teen. It seems the two have an appointment, and Chance's excursions into superheroics have made them late. They meet up with Jenny, who helpfully recounts the trio's origin story. 4 months previous, a mysterious energy source appeared in Professor Jarvis's remedial math class. Before the professor could react, he was annihilated by said energy, which then turned its attention to the students. The energy affected the teens in various hideous ways, many of them dying in the process. The school itself then vanished in a blinding flash, transporting those who still lived to an alternate universe where they never existed. And then things get freaky. Arguing amongst themselves like any self-respecting 1980s super team should, they are suddenly ambushed by cockroaches. Oh, it's just a few at first, but then what follows is a catsaridophobics nightmare as hundreds of thousands of the little bastards come pouring out of the woodwork to form a nigh sentient mass that whoops the crap out of the kids. Taking the fight to the next level, the weird-looking black elf thing from the beginning of the story uses his floating observational orb
to take even greater control of the roaches. This proves to be a big mistake, as Jenny now has a target for her radioactive stave. Oh, did I not mention that? Yeah, she has one. Without the orb to control them, the roaches go back to just being run-of-the-mill house pests, which irritates our villain to no end. Never mind. He has an even better idea for next time. Tapeworms. After this inspiring thought, we return to Jenny and Chance, still in the tenement, where Chance decides to take care of the roaches the old-fashioned way, by stomping them to death. So yeah, it's not exactly Shakespeare, but at the time I really got a kick out of this book. The irreverence and hyperviolence at play here would become a staple of comics by the end of the decade and long into the 1990s, but at the time it felt fresh and exciting. So wait, hold on, Mink. What's all this about self-implication? Well, at the back of the book, there are 3 text stories, including what may be the first published parody of Rorschach from The Watchmen. Pause the video and you tell me. Alongside this is a page for Jenny, whose little tale features her returning home to find everyone she has ever known gone. Well, it turns out I wrote a scene very similar in the second issue of Storm Owl. Sure, it's different enough that I don't feel as though I plagiarized it outright, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't inspired by it.
I didn't realize it until 30 years later, but hey, better late than never. Thanks, Jim. Hope you're still out there telling stories. When it first appeared in June of 1968, his name is Savage was unlike anything comic book readers had ever experienced before. The long-form comic had yet to establish itself in the four-color hierarchy, but creator Gil Kane's interest in bigger stories had been growing for years. Pushing the envelope of dynamic storytelling had led Kane to a varied and exciting career in the comics medium. Born Eli Katz, the artist began working in the field in the late 1930s as a finisher, adding borders, word balloons, and backgrounds to artwork. Kane soon found employment at Marvel, MLJ, later Archie, an American comics group, a run only interrupted by a 19-month stint as an American soldier in the Pacific Theater during the Second World War. Upon returning home from duty, Kane began producing a notable volume of work for National, DC Comics, co-creating Silver Age incarnations of the Atom and the Green Lantern. The artist's lithe, almost balletic form of action became a high point for comics covers of the period, but Kane wanted to do more. The artist wished to stretch out, and, alongside collaborator-writer Archie Goodwin, the two would produce a new type of book. Only this one wasn't for the kiddies. The title Goodwin and Kane were producing would be aimed squarely at the more mature reader and feature levels of violence heretofore unseen on the American newsstand. The two wished to parallel the type of action found in movies of the era, most specifically the over-the-top Lee Marvin vehicle Point Blank. The film proved to be such a powerful motivator that actor Marvin's face was even homaged on the cover of the debut issue. However, the story itself was more Bond than blank, with our title character Savage already an established mercenary, not only known by, but incarcerated for, his violent crimes. How violent? Well, if you're squeamish, then click to the time code below. This is shockingly graphic, even by today's standards. Are you ready? Okay, put your cups on, kids, because this one's a real kick to the cojones. Case number 1, The Return of the Half-Man, begins with some seaside shenanigans. There's a smuggling operation underway, but things do not go as planned.
Mysterious frogmen attack and brutally murder the crew of a boat, but before one man submits, he places a desperate call of alarm. Elsewhere, in a maximum security prison, Savage waits for his appointment with the gallows. However, instead of hanging, he has been set free by the Committee, a typically shadowy secret government organization he has worked for in the past. Savage gets his revenge on a sadistic prison warden by making him eat his own gun. From the jump, it's clear this is leagues distant from Marvel or DC, whose evilest villains appear positively Mayberian beside our hero's casual violence. Savage is tasked with a new mission, and this time, it's personal. Isn't it always? Seems his former CEO Simon Mace has become an unstoppable cyborg bent on worldwide domination, and only our impulse-controlled challenged hero can stop him. What follows is a kaleidoscopic carousel of carnage as Kane catapults the reader from one action set piece to the next. Savage follows a lead to Keeley, an antiques dealer. Keeley is flustered but proves unwilling to talk, leading Savage to demonstrate some decidedly antisocial behavior in the form of systematic destruction of the dealer's baubles. Before Keeley can spill his gut, his ticket gets punched by a mob hit squad dispatched to kill Savage. Our hero battles on, in spite overwhelming odds, but it looks like his number is finally up. And then Mace's daughter and Savage's ex-girlfriend Sheila appears for a last-minute save. The two trade some banter, but before this thing can turn into love connection, Sheila catches the slug and expires mid-escape. Enraged, Savage heads to Washington and demands to speak to the top man, the President of the United States of America himself, who, coincidentally, has just ordered an attack on Russia and the start of World War III. After more scrote-punching action, Savage finally claws his way to the president. Only it's not the president, but Simon Mace wearing a synthetic presidential skin. Great googly moogly, who'd have seen that one coming, folks? Unwilling to listen to voter feedback, Mace attempts to smash his foe beneath his steely presidential fist, leading to an epic and inventive showdown between man and machine, with annihilation waiting in the wings. What's that? No, I'm not going to tell you how it ends. Go find yourself a copy. It's great. Kane envisioned this tale not as a comic, but as a movie on paper, and that really comes through. Archie Goodwin's writing here is suitably amped up to meet Kane's hyper-violent tone, but a little editing may have made this a speedier read. With imagery this direct, one doesn't need things quite so heavy as far as the exposition goes. But hey, these guys were going for a tone, and for the most part they succeeded. The book itself, however, was another story. 200,000 copies of His Name is Savage were printed, but an estimated 90% never reached the newsstands. What Kane was doing was outside of the box as far as distribution went, and newsstand owners were reticent to upset their long-time relationship with the large publishing companies by introducing such a rogue element. Also, the content of Kane's magazine was far more sensationalized and violent than other books on the stands, increasing reader squeamishness. To Kane's shock and dismay, many bundles of his first issue were returned unopened, killing the creator's enthusiasm for the project and seeing this exciting new story abandoned. And as far as the cover goes, in a 1996 interview, Kane stated, "We never had any trouble from Lee Marvin. Obviously, he never saw the goddamn thing. We never had any trouble from anybody." His Name is Savage was re-released in 1982 with a different cover, but nothing much has come of the property since. Like so many great books of the past, there's been a fairly recent attempt to revive it with a gender-swapped version of the character, which went about as well as you would expect.
His name is savage as lightning in a bottle, the sort of thing that only happens once. I purchased my copy at Ides Entertainment in downtown Pittsburgh. If you happen to be in the beautiful downtown Pittsburgh area, be sure and stop at Ides Entertainment for all your records, cassette tapes, rock and roll posters, action figures, comics, and miscellaneous needs. Hey, I'm Jason Mink. Thank you for joining me at this breakfast. I hope to see you next week. I bid you peace.